Hello everyone, welcome to the Age of Warhammer channel. My name is Valhamma, I'm a new content creator for the channel. This is my first review for them, so I hope you enjoy. I've got a really good one for you today. It's the Liber Mechanicum army book for the second edition of the Horus Heresy. I'm not going to do this as a deep dive into each datasheet. I'm going to keep it slightly more high level, going to focus on an overview of the book, give you an understanding of what the content actually is. Focus on a couple of the key things I think have changed, a few things that might be of interest to everybody, but I'm not going to go through each datasheet line by line in detail. There are plenty of content creators that already do that. If you want that kind of content, I'm sure you can find it. But this is more about giving you my impressions of the book, where I think it's going to sit within the game, and where the strengths that I've noticed so far kind of lie with this book. So without further ado, let's get on with the review. As to be expected, as it's a single faction rather than the 18 legions Astartes, or 9 per book, this is a little bit smaller than the two Liber books we've seen so far. Clocks in around about 142 pages, which includes the colour plates at the back, around 130 odd pages of actual kind of content. We don't see a huge number of new units per se, so if I flip to the index for you, so it's all full colour, same as the Liber book, really nice internal printing. We don't really see a lot of new additions per se within the list. The only new unit, or new units plural, sorry, that I've really noticed are the Archetype Magister, which is like a Mechanicum assassin, and the Nightmare X Talon, the Mechanicum armigers that came out fairly recently. They've all been included. Interestingly, the only special character that's not in the Persona Schismata is Decima. He's had a bit of a glow up, he looks quite tasty at the moment. Not quite sure why he's not in the Persona, but such is life. It doesn't really matter, they're all HG choices anyway. As you can see, there are the list is predominantly held within the Mechanicum Tagmata, as you'd expect from the Mechanicum book. Everything in the HQ, elites, troops, fast attack, heavy support, those are all very much, and the Lord of War section as well, are all Mechanicum units. They're very much about forming the Tagmata, the martial arm of the Forge Worlds. However, what you also have in this book are the Davizio Tactica. Now, the Davizio Tactica are a new addition, or a new way of representing the auxiliary and other elements of the Mechanicum war machine. So within that, in this, you have the Titan Legions and the Knight Questorus Household. And we'll come on to them in more detail down the line. Interestingly, it starts off with a nice bit of lore. It really goes into detail about the feudal order nature of the Mechanicum. It focuses on how they are structured as this kind of series of warlords and nobles, the Magi responding to their more senior members of the Mechanicum, and how they're kind of called to war, much like the nobles of England were back in the Middle Ages. So this complex weave and web of authority, seniority, and influence that forms the Tagmata, and each of these Magi held their own martial force called a Tagma, which then collates into the wider Tagmata. Really cool little addition, something I didn't know. Die-hard Mechanicum fans probably already knew this, but it's there for everyone now, which is cool. In terms of the building of the Mechanicum army, there are a few notes at the front of the book here. Box out on allegiance. It makes it very clear that this book is about an orthodox, fairly generic Forge World Tagmata. This does obviously leave the door open to things like more unorthodox Forge Worlds, perhaps Zana, Cyclothraith, the ones that have the characters in this book. They also got into the real deep, dark Mechanicum stuff, so maybe we'll see an expansion on those rules down the line. That'd be really cool to see. As with the Liber books, fairly standard. You have your core and expanded army list profile bits on the left there, just to explain what they are, and then under the building bit, create your allegiance, choose your points limit, all the rest of it. Standard stuff to forming a heresy army. In terms of the Force Orb Chart, it's just a straight copy and paste from an existing Liber book. That's not surprising. The only unit that doesn't really get used in the Mechanicum side is the Primarch option. Everything else is still valid. You still have the Allied Detachment option, you still have a Lord of War Detachment option. There are some additional options for the Mechanicum, which we'll come on to down the line. I can explain those in a bit. But yeah, I don't think the book suffers from this being a copy-paste. I think it's just the nature of the game. I think that's fine. The Davizio Tactica get a bit of a blurb as well, and this is really interesting. It's one of the key differences between the Mechanicum and the other forces of the Imperium and how they structure themselves for the game. Essentially, you can either use this book to make a Tagmata army, a standard Mechanicum army, or you can do a Davizio Tactica army of Knights or Titans. Titans have a few limitations on them, we'll cover those at the end of the video when we get to them. But just to make it clear that you can make an all-Knight army with this book, it's designed to cover the Questorus Knight houses for you. Moving on into the rest of it, Allied Chart, again, that's a copy-paste from the Liber side, I'm not going to cover that in detail, it's exactly the same. Warlord Traits, standard blurb, says the same as it would before for the other books, just about the Mechanicum instead of the Astartes. Standard 3 core Warlord Traits that every army has access to. And then the specific ones for the Mechanicum. I'll cover these in a little bit of detail. So you've got the Soul of Cold Iron, the Logic of Victory, and the Science of Slaughter. Cold Iron is an interesting one. It overrides the pinning limitation on movement and charges for the Warlord and all units with at least one model within 6, but you are still limited to snap shooting. Plus you get an additional movement reaction. This is one that you probably won't see a lot in Cybernetica armies, in particular, Automata being immune to pinning as they are. But if you wanted to go for quite a close quarters army, maybe something based around something like the Myrmidons or Srax, things that have the infantry keyword, Phthalax even, you could definitely get some mileage out of it for that one, but I don't think we'll see that with Automaton. The Logic of Victory. This one I really like. I'm a huge fan of this one. It kind of plays to the idea that the Mechanicum Magi are these overarching command and control beings rather than these frontline warriors. So if your Warlord doesn't shoot or end up in combat, you get an extra reaction in every phase of your opponent's turn, not just one of those phases. So you have 6 reactions in your opponent's turn. And the unit it joins gains additional weapon skill, ballistic skill, +3 initiative and +3 movement for any reactions they take. Again, I can see this one being huge in a combat-based force. If you're doing something like a Disordered Charge and getting +1 weapon skill on your Srax or your Arctype Automata, particularly if you're using the Cybernetica, because then you can override the limitation on reactions for Automata. You can give Automata the ability to make reactions, and +1 BS for things like Castellax or Domitars, things like that. Being able to react with them is definitely going to have some punch to it. Equally, you can see that working quite well with a Phthalax list. If you have a big blob of Phthalax firing their lightning guns with +1 ballistic skill, that's not to be sniffed at either. The final one, Science of Slaughter, this is the one I'm least sure about. Increases weapon skill and strength by 1 for each round of combat. The Warlord is in combat with the same target after the first to a maximum of 10. Extra assault reaction. I'm yet to see a game in 2.0 where a combat lasts more than 2 or 3 turns. I don't know that you'll really, unless you're against something like a Primarch, I'm not sure you'll ever really get maximum value out of this one. Remains to be seen, I might be wrong, that's just my kind of initial view on it. Again, I can see this one working quite well if you went for more of a Myrmidon style list using the close combat Myrmidons with the big axes, and you've got them kind of bodyguarding a similar sort of Tech Priest or Archmagos. But yeah, undecided on that one, we'll see how it pans out. The advanced reaction is brilliant. Advanced reaction made once per battle during the shooting phase essentially allows a unit with an independent character in it and any eligible unit within 12 inches of the target to make a shooting attack. So if the opponent is shooting at one of your units that has an independent character in it, all of your units within 12 inches of that character can make a shooting attack if they're eligible to make a reaction. That is massive. Especially in things like, again, I keep coming back to Cybernetica, but I think they're going to be a really strong option for this book. Being able to override the no reactions limitation on Automata, and then firing with multiple Castellax, multiple Phthalax, Arlatax, Domitars, all of these really potent units being able to react against one unit. You're going to wipe whatever is off the board. So for non-Mechanicum players, that's one to watch out for. Be very careful about making sure you're baiting out reactions, or if you're not against a Cyber 30 list, just try and isolate those independent characters as much as you can, because they will wipe whatever you shoot at them off the board. Vehicles, defensive weapons only, templates use Wall of Death, standard rules for the reactions for those, and can't fire indirectly, so no barrage weapons, things like that. Moving on to the HQ, you have 4 generic and 1 specialist in the HQ slots. You have the Archmagos Prime on Abeyant, Magos Dominus, and Magos Dominus on Abeyant, and then Caleb Decima as your final option. Magos Prime obviously is the kind of the head of your Tagma, your Tagmata, your senior leader. The Magos Dominus is very much a Cybertheurgy based character. I'll go into a couple of things with these guys because they have a lot of special rules. As you can see, that's the special rule block up there. They have quite a lot going for them, plus the Master Cybertheurgist and Orders of Techno Arcana in there as well. So the first thing to mention is that all of the generic HQs have the Cybertheurgist subtype. This doesn't give them anything in of itself, but it opens up these options here under the Cybertheurgy. These are kind of like psychic power disciplines. They allow you to pick up additional abilities, either rights or weapons, which are activated using a leadership test, or often activated using a leadership test. Similar to the psychic powers we've seen already, you can cast, particularly for the rights, a lower version without a test, or you can boost it with a test. If you fail the test, you take an automatic wound with only invulnerable saves allowed. It's just a flat leadership roll, generally. If you have the Automator or vehicle type instead, then you take D3 wounds instead, but that's relatively rare. Really powerful options in there, we'll come to them at the end. There's a lot in there, they're very thematic, they're all based around different elements of the Mechanicum, either the Cybernetica or the Machina, or either repairing machines or breaking machines, things like that. They're really cool, really nice addition, and having them as default kind of free upgrades within the characters built in is nice, I like that. A lot of them, like psychic powers, are instead of shooting, so all of the characters have firing protocols, either 3 or 2, so you can still fire your guns if you want to. Equally, I'm assuming there's nothing stopping you from casting multiple Cybertheurgy powers, something to bear in mind. The second element is the Ordos of Techno Arcana. So these act kind of like Legion traits. They effectively allow you to specialise your Archmagos Prime into one of the houses or sub-factions of the Mechanicum, so Reductor, Cybernetica, Macrotech, Malagra. All of the kind of subsurface divisions within the Mechanicum, you can specialise your High Priest into one of them, basically. And these offer you various different things. The Prime himself, the Archmagos himself, gains some individual bonuses as a unit, but equally you gain some army-wide buffs, which stay in effect even if the Archmagos is removed from the table. So much like Legion traits, they don't disappear. Obviously you'll lose the ones on your actual Warlord, but you won't lose everything. So they're really interesting as well, and we'll come into a bit of detail on those later. The Abeyant is now a separate unit entry rather than a piece of war gear. More toughness, more wounds, roughly similar to how it was before. Can't go into transports, things like that. Whole list of very spicy upgrades and bits of equipment you can give them. Again, as I said, I'm not going to focus too much on these in detail. You'll be able to see other people with in detail ones on those. Moving on into the elite slot. First one you've got is Tech Priest or Auxilia. So again, these are your lesser priests. They can take some options of Cybertheurgy, and they get a lesser version of the Order of High Techno Arcana. They can be Engine Seers, they can be Automator Specialists, or they can be Reductor, and exchange their servo arms for big guns. Very cool unit. There are ways of making them troops as well, through some of the Ordos of High Techno Arcana. Can take a transport, can still take servo automator. They don't help with Battlesmith, they're purely there as kind of weapons and gun platforms and support and ablative wounds, basically. But not much has changed in those boys. The Archetype Magister, and this is one of the really interesting new ones, this is the kind of Heretic Assassin. It's a unit that has the Loyalist special rules, so only Loyalists can have them. They're specifically to target and hunt down Heretic Magi. They have the Haywire stave, the Corpusant stave to start with an Architect Pistol. Invulnerable save, Cortex Controller, they can be joined by Artalax or Vorex Automator as well. Much like a Praevian can for the Liber Astartes. Paragon Blade can have a servo arm, Machinator array, things like that. So you can make these into quite interesting little side characters, make them quite unique. A lot of options there for some conversions. I hope we'll see an actual model for them. They're in the book, I'd expect to, but it'd be really cool to see what people can come up with the conversions on that one. The Domitar, very durable. Changes to things like Automata. They've got Hammer of Wrath, they've got Relentless, they've got 4 or 5 attacks on the charge, 4 standard, toughness 7s, 5 wounds. They're going to be quite pokey. Ignis missiles, they're interesting, they're not fantastic. They ignore cover. They can be great against things like Militia and Solar Auxilia, maybe another Mechanicum, but Marines won't have too much to worry about on those. Again, Atomantic Deflector as well, so immune to instant death, taking D3 damage instead. Same as we've seen for Contemptors and things like that. I will double check that. That might be the flat 3 damage one rather than the D3. I'll double check that later. Either way, they're not getting instant death, which is cool. Mode and Secutors, I've mentioned these guys a couple of times already. I think they've gotten a bit better. They've got Firing Protocols 2 still. They still have 2 guns. You can have up to 10 of them in a unit. With them being bulky 3, you can fit a maximum of, I think, 7 in a Terrarius. More than you'll need, really. They've got 3 attacks each, 4 for the 4 for the Secutor Lord. Sorry. Weapon skills only 4, not fantastic. There might be some ways of boosting that with Cyber Theurgy. I've not gone through those in full detail. There's quite a lot to take in on the layers you can apply to this book. But toughness 5 and 4 wounds, they're going to do some work for you. And they have heavy as well to make them a bit more durable. Relentless and stubborn, hatred everything. So they've got a lot going for them now. The tech thralls are interesting. They're very cheap, 45 points for 10. They've got heavy, they've got line, they've got stubborn, they've got feel no pain 5 up, hatred everything. Only a 6 up armor save, but you've got the 5 up feel no pain anyway. They also have hatred everything, which is interesting, and the right of pure thought, so they can never make sweeping advances, things like that. So these guys are very much your plodding objective holders. They're not particularly exciting, but they'll get the job done. Can have a unit of up to 30 of them as well. They're 3 points a model, not too bad. Phthalax, I think these are going to remain kind of the standard line troops for most people. 125 points for 3, infantry line. They've got Jin Sight to remove cover saves, or -2 from cover saves. Feel no pain built in. They're still relentless, they're still stubborn. Their jump pack's had a little bit of rework. It's now an Incunabulum jetpack rather than just a standard jump pack. They get +6 to their movements. Their movement 13 inches now, which is very cool. Ignore terrain but take dangerous. Can make an additional 6-inch move in the shooting phase after shooting, so they've still got the shoot and scoot. They can deep strike, and they also gain an extra 6-inch move during reactions as well, so they've still got a 13-inch move for any movement-based reactions they can take. Sorry, not a 13-inch move, it'll be plus initiative, so they have a 8-inch move for most of the movement-based reactions. Can still go into a Terrarius even with a jetpack. All the standard stuff. Same weapon options they had previously, nothing too exciting there. But they're a really solid unit. They're still toughness 5, 3 wounds, 4 up save. I think, as I say, we'll see quite a lot of them going forward in people's lists. The Guardian Automata, these are the little squid-like ones, 120 points. 2 wounds apiece, toughness 5, night vision, relentless. They do have the support unit rule, so they can't be your standard one. They do have line, they do have heavy, but they also have the Guardian rule. Guardian rule, essentially, they need to be attached to a character, really. You can take them without a character, but they're not very good without them. When you don't have them in a unit, they lose movement, they lose initiative, things like that. Still have a Rad Furnace, still have Kraken Bolter, so Marines are going to have to be careful around these boys. Cybernetic Combat Array, standard as we've seen before. As far as I know, not much has changed with these units. Can have up to 16 in a unit. I don't think you'd ever go that high, but the option's there. Castellax, these are going to be prevalent. They're 95 points now, they've had a bit of a points drop. The additional ones are 85, the guns are a bit cheap. You're looking at 115 points for the first and 105 points after that. Which I think is actually about what they were before. I'd have to double check the red book, but either way, they are Automata, they do have the Cybernetica keywords, so you're not getting reactions, all that sort of stuff. But as I said before, if you go Cybernetica focused, you're going to want a few of these. You get line on them as they become scoring. You can override the lack of reactions with Darkfire cannons and multi-melters and the built-in bolters. You've still got the option for power blades. A unit of 5 of these is not a huge investment for the amount of impact they can have on the table. Strength 7, toughness 6, 4 wounds. Weapon skills, crap, it's 3, but as I say, there might be a way to boost that via the Cyber Theurgy elements. So lots of interesting stuff going on with these guys now. I can see them being a popular choice going forward. Finally, the Terrarius. Again, not going to touch on this in too much detail. It's the conveyor. It's 5 hull points, 22 transport, 14, 12, 12 armor. Still got the shock ram. Still got Volkite calibers. Galvanic traction drive, so keep going if it gets immobilized. Whether we'll see a lot of these going forward, hard to say. With it being an expensive resin kit, it might not see a huge amount of table time unless people already have it or feel they need it. But with Mechanicum being quite durable now, I don't know how much we'll see of them. We'll see. Fast attacks, Arl attacks. These guys have had a bit of a glow up. So 150 points, they are expensive, but they are the Domitar size combat ones. Weapon skill 4, strength 7, toughness 6, 4 wounds, initiative 4, so simultaneous with marines. They are automated, they are Cybernetica, so they do have some limitations on them, but they've got some kick to them. They can increase their movement to 12 and gain all the bonuses to charge you'd expect from that. They have a plasma cannon and light auto cannons built in. Excuse me, sorry. They can't run and they can't use the booster reaction, but they do get deep strike, and as we know, you can now charge from deep strike, so I can see a couple of these guys getting dropped in to quite a few lists. You could always back them up with the next unit, the Srax. These are the kind of the combat Phthalax. 2 lightning claws are standard, so you're looking at 5 attacks on the charge, 4 if you get charged. Feel no pain, stubborn. They've got the same jump pack booster as the Arctype, so they can go up to movement 12 with all the bonuses to their charge and all the rest of it, so you're +3 on your charge modifier, even from deep strike. So there's a lot going for these ones. You can still give them the power fist as well. You only gain 1 attack rather than 2, so you'll be on 3 attacks base, 4 for the charge. But it's an option if you want some extra strength 8 in there as well. Vorax, these guys are going to be quick. They're movement 8 base, they've got fleet 2, they've got lights, they add an extra 1 to their initiative for running, so your run move is a standard 13 plus fleet. Still got the power rays, still got the rotor cannons, lightning gun, and an automatic deflector in there as well. You can have a unit of up to 6 of them, they can have rad cleansers for every 3. I can see these guys getting used quite a lot as like a hunting pack and a flanking unit, same as they were before. Toughness 5, 3 wounds, 3 up save. They're fairly durable. So yeah, I can see these. I can see the Vorax getting some runarounds, particularly in things like the assassin unit as their kind of hunting hounds. I think that'd be a really cool looking unit. So we'll wait and see. I know a few friends have started building units to these, so I'm sure they'll see some table time soon. Voltarax Stratos. This is the not bloat drone flyer. These ones are interesting. They are automator again. So all the limitations of that, but again, Cybernetic, you can override it. Decent number of guns. You've got 2 Havoc launchers and an Arc Blaster, Automatic Deflector again, and the thrusters give you move 16, so they're fairly quick. They've got Jin sight, so they can reduce cover by 2. It will not die, and night vision, and then surveillance protocols, which is sort of like an Overwatch type thing. Lots of cool stuff for them. Toughness 6, 4 wounds. Only 125 points, so they seem relatively cheap for a fast-moving gunboat. Again, well, jury's out as to how much table time they'll see, but I quite like them. I think in particularly, a list that needs a bit of speed, they're not a bad choice. Moving on to heavy support, Thanatars, everyone's favourite love-hate relationship with the plasma bucket. These have had a bit of a change now. It's 235 for 1, and then you can have them as a maniple. You can add an additional 2 of them for 235 points a model. So you can have a unit of up to 3 in a single maniple. However, what you can then do is upgrade one of them to be a Thanatar Castellax, the one with the heavy laser cannon over the shoulder instead of the plasma mortar, and they effectively just form a single unit. Equally, what you can do is upgrade one to a Castellax even if you don't take additional models, and then possibly make it a Paragon of Metal, and then have it just run around on its own. That's also a thing you can still do. I think they're still going to be taken in many lists. They're still very, very good. 2 up save, toughness 8, 7 wounds, so Leviathan durability, basically. Lower initiative, reasonable number of attacks with 3. 4 even because they have the 2 shock charges, and that's not included in the profile, so 4 attacks base. Combat's not where you want them though, but they can definitely take a few hits before they fall. The Myrmidon Destructors, these are the gun-heavy Myrmidons instead of the combat-based ones with the axes. Starting with a Volkite Culverin and a Shock Charger, you can upgrade their Volkite Culverin with a variety of weaponry. These haven't really changed much, so I'm not going to really linger on them. They are BS5 though, so hitting on 2s, weapon skill 4, high leadership, 4 wounds, toughness 5, same as the other ones. So definitely a potent choice for some lists to get some extra firepower in there. The Karaknos Assault Tank, this is the mortar tank that they released on the Terrarius chassis. 5 hull points, 14, 12, 12. BS5. There are ways of getting effectively Vox Caster-like abilities to reroll Scatter as well, which is quite cool across the list. Flare shield built in. When it goes bang in a big way due to the hazardous munitions. It seems good. Again, I've not really seen them on the table much in 1.0, so whether we'll see them in second. There's a lot of other good options, particularly in the heavy support choice. So maybe this is another one that will kind of linger a bit and not really see much table time, but we will see. Krios, these were always a favourite of a lot of Mechanicum players. I remember seeing a lot of kind of squadrons of 2 or 3 or 4 even on the table at any one time. 125 points is still quite cheap. They've got It Will Not Die, 4 hull points, 13, 12, 10 armour. Movement 16, these guys are fast. They don't have the light rule, but they do have the fast subtype, which is similar just for vehicles rather than infantry. Can take the Plasma Fusel, which is the kind of ordnance for mainly to take out dreads, tanks, terminators type thing, or the lightning cannon to start with, which is kind of the more standard marine deleter. It's an AP3 large blast if I remember rightly, so pretty potent. I think we'll still see a lot of these on the table. I think they're probably going to be 2 squadrons of 2 and then a unit of Thanatars for most people heavy support choices. But we'll see how that pans out as things go into the game. One of their main challenges, I think, is going to be the next unit, the Morax Talons. These are the little Mechanicum armigers. They're a really cool looking model, and they get quite a lot of cool stuff. They've got their own advanced reaction. They've got the Talon rule, so you can have them as a unit of up to 4, which deploy together and then can act individually. Move through cover and night vision. They've got some decent guns available to them. Toughness 7, 6 wounds, 3 up save, so slightly less durable than a Contemptor, purely on the armour save, but I think we'll see a fair number of these going into lists. Into Lord of Wars, you've got the standard Mechanicum Knights. All of these have It Will Not Die. They've got night vision, they've got overtax reactor, which gives them some buffs. Pretty similar, 7 hull points, 13, 12, 12 armour, strength 8. I think we might see these taken as Lords of War relatively commonly, mainly because they're quite cheap, 400 points-ish. It means you can take them in a 2k list if you really wanted to, and they're easy to fit into a 3k list with minimal impact. What's interesting is that the Mechanicum Knights you can't take in a Questorus Household under this title. There are Questorus versions of these you can take instead, but they don't have It Will Not Die. So at the moment there's no way of running a dedicated Mechanicum Knight household, which I think I understand why. I think they wanted to give the Questorus more of a focus, which is cool. Potentially a bit of a shame, but equally they have left the door open to other Davizio Tactica. I think we will definitely see a Mechanicum Knight household list in the not too distant future, possibly as a PDF or possibly as a Crusade or campaign upgrade. It would be a very minimal thing to do. You replace or add the Mechanicum Armature as an option. You have the Mechanicum upgrades on the Knights that can take it. That's kind of it, really. So it'd be a fairly simple change to make. Knight Atropos, 500 points. These guys are still as devastating as they ever were. And then the Castus Asterius, the one with the heavy conversion beamers. Very, very cool model, very retro Mechanicum style. 625 points. You can fit it in 3k. Whether you'll take it at 3k, not sure. It's a relatively good investment, but there are other options available. And then the 2 Ordinatus. The Ulator is prohibitively expensive. It's just a nugget over 1,000 points, so you're looking at 4,300 point games just to be able to take it as Lord of War. But rightly so, this thing is an absolute monster. And then the Acastus, which is the giant mole, which we know and love. That one you can take in smaller points games. You can fit it in 3,500 points, or just over 3,000 points. Doesn't quite fit in 3,000, but not far off. whether people will take it, it's very niche. Subterranean Assault, Reinforced Structure, Capacity 42. You can fit a lot in it and bring it up and surprise your opponent with it. Whether people will, I'm not convinced. The Persona Schismata, these guys are really cool. These are Dracovac and Scoria, so the two Dark Mechanicum special characters that have had models so far. They have an absolute ton of special rules. That's the special rule list there. Dracovac, I think, is going to see quite a bit more use. In particular, the Liquefractor, one of his special attacks. He can exchange all his attacks in the assault phase for a single hit, but you roll 2d6, subtract the target's toughness, and that's how many wounds they take with an AP of 2. That's pretty horrific. Against any kind of non-Primarch special character, you're pretty much instant killing them, and because it doesn't count as instant death, there's not a lot they can do about it. An average roll against a Space Marine is doing 3 wounds. That kills a Praetor. If you spike the roll, you're killing Sigismund, any of the Corswain, any of the big special characters are likely to end up dying to that, or at least getting heavily injured. If it has an armor value, you reduce the armor value by half and then subtract that off, and that's the number of penetrating hits they take. So against anything up to armor kind of 12, you're taking generally a minimum of 1 penetrating hit, if not 2 or 3. When you get up to kind of armor value 13, 14, it becomes slightly more dubious about how much impact it'll have. Obviously the average on 2d6 is 7, half of 14 is 7, so there's a chance you do nothing. Equally, if you spike the roll, you could do 5 penetrating hits to a Spartan at AP2. So there's a lot going for it, and I think we'll see quite a lot of use around that. He can also buff units around him. He gives +1 ballistic skill to a unit he joins, and he's got his own high Techno Arcana, which allows him to be taken as a troop's choice in a Questorus Household. So if you wanted to add some Mechanicum into a Knight Army directly, you can add him as a traitor, Detachment obviously, and then you can take some Castellax and Vorax as well as non-compulsory troops, which is very cool, and opens up some options around a very interesting looking Knight list. You can also have an Abeyant, as he's modelled with one at the moment. Scoria is a bit of a monster, the one you'd expect him to be. He's high movement, decent weapon skill, decent strength, high toughness, high wounds. Again, a massive list of special rules. He's got Fear, he's got Eternal Warrior, Battlesmith 3+, has his own kind of Cybernetic elements. So I say he has his own. He has 4 of them. He has 4 different Arcanas he can choose from, and because he has Fire Protocols 3, I'm assuming he can cast from 3 different ones in the same turn. The Vodian Spectre is also is awesome. Strength 7, AP 2, melee 2-handed, Armor Bane melee, Exoshock 4+, Murderous Strike 5+, with 5 attacks on the charge. He's going to cut through quite a lot of elite stuff. If you've got multiple wound characters, like he wants to be going and killing Terminators, characters, potentially even things like Primarchs. I think he'll struggle to get through the Primarchs, because obviously they have Eternal Warrior or similar, but even so, he's got a lot of potential to put some wounds down on things. And he lifts the limitations on reactions for all units within 6 inches that have a model within 6 inches. So surround him with Dark Mechanicum Automata and just go to town. Really, really cool model, really cool option. So the Davizio Tactica, this is where we get the divergent kind of force org charts and options. So we'll start with the Titans. They have their own force org chart now. What's interesting though is that this has to be an optional force org chart. This has to be taken alongside a Crusade detachment. It cannot be taken solely on its own. You cannot just field Titans anymore. I'm not sure how I feel about that, because they've also included the requirement to take Secutari as bodyguards around the Titans anyway. So it feels like this could have been a complete army. This could have been a primary detachment without too much issue. However, what this does do is get round the limitation in the Mechanicum book. You cannot ally any form of Mechanicum with any form of Mechanicum, including Davizio Tactica. So you cannot use the allies chart to add in Titans or Knights or other branches of the Mechanicum. However, because they have their own force org chart that is optional, that's not an ally, very specifically not an ally, you can include them alongside a Mechanicum detachment. Which makes sense thematically, like the Titans were at least beholden to the Mechanicum in part, so it makes sense you could deploy them together. Like I say, it's an optional detachment. I see what they're going for. I think it could have been a primary. You're capped at 3 Lords of War, so a maximum of 3 Titans. You've got... it's a little bit unclear whether you have 6 or 7 troops choices. In the graphic you have 1 compulsory and 5 optional, but in the text you have 1 compulsory and 6 optional. It's one of the two. Aim for 6, you can't go wrong. And 2 optional HQ choices. Those 2 options there are purely the Secutari. That's all they're there to fill out. And the fact you have to include them to protect the Titans, I really like. I think that's a really nice thematic addition. And they're actually quite cool units as well. So you've got the new HQ choice, which is the Axiarch. This seems very much to be based, rules-wise, on the plastic Skitarii Marshall model that GW produce. It starts with an Arc Maul and a Radiant Pistol, which is not dissimilar to what you get with that plastic kit. And I think that'd be a really nice model to have leading some of the Secutari hoplites as well. It fits that look really nicely. The other options, you've got the Hoplite Phalanx and the Peltast Phalanx. These are the standard 4-draw ones you've got at the moment with the resin upgrades. Not a huge amount of changes as far as I can see. They seem pretty similar. So not going to linger on those because when there are Titans on the field, you're probably not staring at the little guys too much. But a nice little option, and because you have to take them now, people are going to have to invest a little bit in them. Into the Titans, again, these are kind of what you would expect. The Warhound is 750, starts with 2 Megabolters, has the standard resin kit that we currently have. All of the upgrades for weapons are free, you don't pay any additional points. 2 Void Shields, has night vision. Reactor Meltdown now has a leveled rule, so the small Titan, the Warhound, has Magna, then it goes to Major, then it goes to the big boy, Maxima. So the explosion varies depending on the size of the Titan, which is quite cool. Interestingly, we don't have rules at the moment for the new Adeptus Titanicus scale upgrade, so the Volkite for the Warhound doesn't have rules at the moment. I suspect those rules will drop as and when the model for them does. Or possibly part of a campaign book at some point down the line. But currently, all of the Titans, the Reaver, the Warhound, the Warbringer, they're all limited by what is currently available via 412. Which makes sense, like standard GW method of only print rules you have models for. Fine, it's not a problem. Movement 16, Weapon Skill, Ballistic Skill 5, Strength 10, 14, 13, 12. 12 hull points and then the 2 Void Shields, so reasonably durable. You're going to have to kind of sit and chew through it to get to the meaty bits inside. That said, I can see Sun Killers doing a number on this, especially if you get the Void Shields down first. Reaver 1500, so double up. 14, 13 armor, 18 hull points. Weapon skill 8, which is interesting. So they've used the new weapon skill chart to quite good effect here, I feel, to represent the fact that you're not going to be able to damage a Titan very easily. Even if you land a blow, it's still really tough armor to get through. So between the high armor values and the weapon skill to reduce the number of hits it takes in the first place, I think it's a really nice way of conveying the durability of a war machine of this scale. Again, same weapons as before, starts with 2 Gatling Blasters, all the upgrades are free, so Laser Blaster, Melter Cannon, Power Fist. The interesting one for this is that there is no carapace option for this one at the moment, because obviously the Turbo Laser turret from the old Realm of Battle tile is currently out of production. It doesn't currently have rules in this book, so if you have got one of those you bought separately and then transferred across, currently doesn't have rules. Again, might be a PDF that comes out early on, might be a little while, not sure, but basically you're limited to what is currently on sale in 412. Warbringer Nemesis, 2,000 points, 24 hull, 15 armor. It's the first time we see 15 armor in the Titans. Slightly slower at move 12, same as the Reaver. Again, same 4-12 options. This is the first one we start to see the defense, the batteries, the kind of point defense on the Titan as well. It's the artillery Titan, we know what it does, we know how it goes bang. The Warlord Titan, the big boy, this is 3,000 points. This is basically a self-contained army. 6 Void Shields. The Towering Monstrosity rule, it can only be hit by Knights or Super Heavies in melee on a 5. Everything else hits it in melee on a 6 regardless of weapon skill. Carapace weapons now have the minimum range rule of 24 inches. It makes a lot of stomp attacks. I think it makes about 7 stomp attacks. At strength 10, it's a beast, it's a monster. Trying to take this thing down is going to be a significant challenge now. I don't think they'll... Well, to come back to the Force Organisation point for a minute, the Titan list is beholden to the 25% rule around Lords of War. So to see a Warlord Titan on the field, you're playing a 12,000 point game, minimum. Assuming you take no other Titans, it's a 12,000 point game. That said, that is the rules as written for that style of game. I could very well see most of these Titans seeing a game purely on the instance of, I want to see if my 3,000 point army can kill a Warlord. And that's really cool, I'd love to see that. I think house ruling is always a thing. Titans should be rare, and they should be potent, and they should devastate whatever they come up against. So you don't want to see that across the table in a 3,000 point tournament. That would suck, because no one's list will be built to handle it. So I get it, makes sense. From a fun perspective, you can always just take them anyway. You're not going to see these guys at competitive play events very often, if at all. Which is fine. I think that's the right call. We'll see how that changes over time, but for now, I think that's the correct choice. But that's pretty much the Titans covered. The second one, the Questorus Household. Now these have had a bit of a change over how they played in 1.0. They have their own Force Org chart now, which is specifically only troops and Lord of War options, with the options to take an allied detachment as well. With it being Davizio Tactica, you can also have the Titans as an optional Force Org chart as well. So you can do an all-Knight and Titan army, which is quite cool. Again, points allowing. What should be noted though is that the Household Detachment, where this differs from the Titan army, is that the Household Detachment Force Org chart can be taken as primary or optional. So you can either have this alongside a Mechanicum army or alongside any other Crusade army, or you can take it as an army in its own right. So you can still field an entire army of Knights. That's still a thing you can do. However, what they have changed is how those Knights fit into the Force Organisation chart. So no longer do you have the knightly ranks making up your Force Org chart, which you then apply a suit to. Now what you have is that your 2 troops options are the 2 types of plastic armature. You have the Thermal Lance and the Autocannon variants. And you have to take 2 troop choices for every Lord of War choice. And Lord of War choice are your main Knights, they're your big boys. But there is fundamentally no limit on the number of Lords of War you can take. Well, you can take 10 options of troops, so you can take 5 Knights maximum, fill that. That's the Force Org chart is then filled at that point. 5 Knights and 10 units of armatures is going to be a big game. You're going to struggle to fit that into anything anyway. What this means is that the Knights list becomes a lot more friendly to play against for a Marine player. Because you've got the armatures who are also your line units, these are your scoring units, they're going to make up quite a significant number of your points. So you're probably only fielding maybe 2 or 3 big Knights in a 3k game, at a guess. You're not generally going to see 4, 5, 6 big Knights and nothing else, which is really hard to chew through. You're going to have the option of targeting the Warglaives who have a standard stat profile. You can wound them with normal weaponry. But you still get your big stompy boys as well. You still get to play your Knights. It will still feel like a Knight army. I really like this change. I think it's fantastic. I think it makes Knights so much more fun to play against, potentially. And not having to go through the rigmarole of, oh, I'm bringing Knights this week, make sure you've got 30 las cannons to deal with them and all the rest of it. We'll see how it plays out over the next few months of gameplay. I can understand that there will be people who have Knight armies at the moment who are not going to like this change because they either don't own armatures or don't like the models or don't like taking them or just want to field big Knights. Again, house ruling's a thing. Talk to your opponent. I'm sure they won't mind, or at least they might be up for the challenge. But from a pickup game perspective, from a competitive perspective, and from a just general fun perspective, I think this is a really healthy change for the game, and it's good to see. The other important thing to note is that the Lords of War limitation of 25% does not apply to this Force Org chart, so you don't have to just take 25% of your list as big knights. You can have as many big knights as you can fit, provided you have the 2-to-1 ratio with armigers. In terms of your troops options, as I say, you've got those two. No real upgrades other than the melter gun. You can take them units of up to 4. And then you get into the big boys. So these are your standard suits. GW plastic kit, the Questorus with all of the options. And then you've got the resin ones, so the Lancer, the Castigator, the Acheron, the Porphyrion, which is now 1-to-1, 0-to-1, sorry, the Acastus, the Atropos. Both of the Acastus variants and the Atropos are all 0-to-1 in Knight list, which again is a nice change. I think it's the right call. These are meant to be rarer suits outside of the Mechanicum. When we get the Mechanicum list, maybe that limitation will be lifted. But for a standard Questorus household, those should be rare suits. They should be difficult to take. You can take one of each, so you could take two Acastus and an Atropos, provided they're different Acastus, but you can't have 2 Porphyrions in the same list anymore. You do have options, as I said earlier, of the Mechanicum Knights. These do lose the It Will Not Die rule from the Mechanicum side, but they are cheaper to compensate by about 20 points. Other than that, they're pretty much the same. And then the Atropos, which is the same points as the Mechanicum one. I think it does lose a couple rules, but it is the same points. It's still a beast. You're still going to want to take one if you can. And then the Conversion Beamer Asterius as well. And then you've got your knightly ranks. Some of these give units character, as in the character keyword, or subtype, sorry. At that point, you still can't issue and accept challenges unless it states otherwise, so you don't gain all of the benefits of character. That's what's listed down here. Unless you're fighting against another knight, a titan, or a monster, or a primarch. So you can't charge into the tactical squad and challenge the sergeant, but you can charge into Horus and challenge him, or into another knight and challenge them. So it very much plays into the idea of you should be fighting things you're equal in a challenge, everything else is just chaff, why would you bother? Some really cool upgrades. They're relatively similar to the old ones, things like the Dolorous having extra weapon skill and things like that. The Dolorous can also sweeping advance, which is amazing. I think the Dolorous upgrade will still end up on the Castigator more often than not for the Tempest Blade. I think that's going to be fairly standard. Still got the Scent Shell for the kind of Master of the Household. But yeah, some really cool upgrades, some really nice touches. A couple bits we see here that are influenced by the 40k rules, so things like the Preceptor, who is still the kind of the training knight, as in training the younger knights. He buffs armigers, or they buff armigers that are nearby, for example. So some cool options. I think people need to have a proper read through those and see what fits best with which suit. You've still got the Aspirant as an option as well for 30-point reduction, so you can make a knight cheaper to fit him in, things like that. So plenty of options. Mechanicum unit types. So that's it for the knights. Like I say, I'm a real big fan of the changes. I think they've done a really nice job on how they make them work and all the rest of it. It makes it much more balanced. So I'm excited to see people play with those. A couple notes on these, on the Mechanicum unit types. The Cybernetic Unit type is the most common, understandably. Most of the Automator, if not all of them, have this. Gives them program behaviour, must shoot or charge the nearest unit unless there's a Cortex controller nearby. May fire all of their weapons in shooting attacks, including as part of reactions. Can fire heavy and ordnance and counter stationary, and could ignore initiative penalties for charging through terrain. Guardian rule I kind of went across earlier. Basically, you want to assign them to characters. It effectively negates the precision strike or sniper rule, so you can never target a character provided there's a Guardian model still in the unit. That's going to be key. I'll come into the overview, but your characters are going to be absolute linchpins in how this army functions. They're going to be so important. So having a couple Guardian units to put your most key models around is no bad thing. The Paragon unit type, as you'd expect, comes from the Paragon and Metal upgrade. Can never modify their characteristics other than wounds or hull points, so you don't get degraded weapon skill or ballistic skill ever. Can always fire all their weapons, fire heavy and ordnance if stationary, but can never be joined by other models regardless of special rules. So you can never attach a Tech Priest or a character to a Paragon model. That's just not a thing you can do anymore. If you could in 1.0, I can't remember for sure. Those are the kind of the key ones that are of interest. into the Cybertheurgy. Again, I'm not going to go through all this in detail. These are all your Cybertheurgical rights. You generally get a right and a weapon, similar to the Psychic powers. Most of them require a leadership test, as I mentioned. High Techno Arcana, the Archimandrite, which is the kind of the leadership cast, Cybernetic Lacrymata, Macrotech, Malagra, Myrmidax, and Reductor. So things like Reductor aren't their own army list. The Order Reductor is not a separate army list. You can specialise a Mechanicum Tagmaster to Reductor by taking a Magos Prime with the Reductor High Arcane. And then your special rules, which I'm not going to go through in detail. So yeah, that is the Liber Mechanicum book as an overview. Let's say 142 pages, lots of really cool stuff. I think the way these are going to play primarily, if you do a Tagmata list, is this remorseless, inexorable wall of flesh and steel. They're going to be really hard to keep at bay. Most stuff can move, shoot, and charge. Most of the stuff can't be pinned. None of the automaton can be pinned. A lot of the other stuff is high leadership and either fearless or stubborn. You've got a lot of high toughness, high wounds, so small arms fire is going to be plinking off wounds here and there, but it's not going to have a massive impact. Your units are not cheap for number of models, but number of wounds per point is quite high. It's around the same equivalence as you get from Marines, with roughly comparable saves, and usually a higher toughness. Character models, as I mentioned, both HQ and Elite are going to be really key. They're going to be linchpins around which your army functions, either through Cybertheurgy or just through Cortex controllers to override program behaviour. They're going to be really important. You're going to have to really manage your characters with this list to get the most out of it. The depth of the army lies primarily in the Cybertheurgy and the High Techno Arcane. Much like with the Legion traits and Warlord traits and all the overlaps you get with Marines, that's where the meat of this book's differences are going to lie. Because you have a standard Tagmata army the same as a Space Marine list. It's how you apply those various buffs and differences that's going to really differentiate your force from your other forces or your friend's force. And the option to add in Knights and Titans is cool as well. As I say, huge fan of the way Questorus has been overhauled, generally looking at between 6 and 8 armigers and 2 to 3 big knights for a 3k game. I think that'll give a much better game to your opponent. I think you'll probably end up with more satisfactory games as a result, rather than just wiping your opponent off the table. Of course, if you come against an Iron Warriors player, you may feel differently, but I'll leave that to your discretion. As I say, Titan's unsure on at this point. I think the heavy limitations on the Force Orb Chart by having to take it alongside a Crusade force is potentially a bit limiting. However, House Ruling exists. The Maniple Detachment could easily be classed as a primary, and I don't think the game would suffer as a result, particularly if you're just playing a fun scenario with a few friends, or a massive game. I do really like the compulsory Secutari though. I think that's a brilliant touch. It really drives home the nature of how Titan houses go to war. Big fan, real big fan of that. And the addition of the new HQ is very cool as well, so you can have these very cool like marshals who are there kind of organising the defensive force. Overall, I think Mechanicum players are going to be really happy with this book. I don't think it's differentiated itself too far from where we were at 1.0. It's just cleaned things up and made things 2.0 appropriate. I don't think there's going to be a huge investment. I don't think you're going to have to go out and buy another, £300 worth of resin just to play a Mechanicum army if you already had a force. The only difference there is the Knights. Obviously, if you don't have Armigers, you need Armigers. If you have Titans, you need Secutari. But that's kind of it. From an investment perspective, any army that was battle ready in 1.0 is battle ready in 2.0 for a Tagmata list, which is very cool and nice to see. So yeah, that's the Liber book. Feel free to leave any comments, anything you want to see, anything you think I could do better. I'll say this is my first review, so if you have watched to the end, thank you very much. Yeah, comments, feedback, be great to hear from you all, and look forward to speaking to you all next time. Thank you very much. Cheers.